I'm all good. I've been sitting and just chilling, listening to some stuff on economics and having my morning coffee. And I always show up on time.
Never doubted you, honest. My seat's gone a bit wet though.
How have you been?
Yeah, good. We got about 20 people with us so far. We're expecting over 40, so maybe I'll give it another minute. How are the US handling COVID then? We only see what they want to share with us. How are you guys handling it?
Well, I'm actually in Vancouver, Canada. I split my time between I'm Canadian. I split my time between Vancouver and Scottsdale, Arizona. And both places that I live have very, very low incident rates and very low death rates. So I think it's very overhyped, from what I've seen, at least here. My general feeling is that there probably are certain areas that should have been shut down, and the rest of us should have been able to continue with our lives until there was a bigger issue. But I've only known one person so far who's gotten infected. I have a very large social network. But then unfortunately, I spoke to a friend last week whose 87-year-old mother was diagnosed 12 days ago, and she died, 6 days after that. So that was just a fast hit. But again, she was 87,
Well, the big problem, we talked about this on the weekend, the big problem we're having is if anyone dies and they have COVID in their system, they're putting it down as a COVID death, even though, as you say, it might have been age and other things. My uncle died of it right at the start of it, but he actually had a stroke. I was left at home for a couple of days, also had diabetes, but I've seen the death certificate and they put COVID down.
Yeah, well, and what's happening in the US more than ever as well is the US has a for-profit healthcare system. They have private hospitals that are owned by entrepreneurial groups.
Yeah.
And as soon as you put entrepreneurs and profit in health, there's a huge incentive. So I have a friend who owns a large chain of medical locations, has been in business for 20 years. And he said to me, he was at my house 2 weeks ago, and he said, Cameron, there's no incentive for us to tell that it's not this bad. He goes, this is the best thing that's ever happened for my business, but it's not a big scary thing. But he goes, there's no incentive for me to tell anybody. Yeah. He said, we did 300 tests on the weekend and we got 0 positive results out of 300 tests. But he goes, I'm not going to go tell the media that because A, it hurts me, and B, they're not going to tell the story. Anytime the media has any good news, they're not going to talk about it anyway. So it's a real scary situation that I think we could be perpetuating, but whatever, we'll see.
Well, now we've started talking and we seem to have most of the people we were expecting. There were still a couple short. Do you want to, I've been talking about you a lot over LinkedIn over the last week or so leading up to this, but do you maybe want to give people a minute or so on your backstory and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I guess my backstory is I was groomed as an entrepreneur. I was raised by a father who was an entrepreneur. Both of my grandparents ran their own companies as well. So my brother and my sister and myself were all groomed to be entrepreneurs. And for the last 20 years, we've all run our own companies. So that's all I've ever really known. I ran my first real company, I say real company where I had employees. I was 20 years old and I had 12 employees in my first business. I ran, my own business through 3 years while I was in university. I had my own company. Graduated from university and I started coaching entrepreneurs. So 31 years ago, I started coaching entrepreneurs. By the time I was 28, I'd coached 120 entrepreneurs in 2 countries. All of them had at least 10 employees as well. And then I went on and I co-founded the largest collision repair chain in North America that we built up and sold. And I was president of a private currency, similar to what Bitcoin is doing. We did it 20 years ago, sold the company for $64 million. Then I came on with my best friend who was running a small little junk removal business. He had 14 employees, or actually 13. I was employee number 14 at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I was the chief operating officer. And when I left 6.5 years later, we had 3,100 employees system-wide. We'd grown into 4 countries, 330 cities, gone from 2 million to 106 million. Left there and started coaching entrepreneurs again. I've coached entrepreneurs and worked with entrepreneurs in 28 countries. I've done paid speaking events on 6 continents. I've written 5 books. And then 3 years ago, I started the only network of its kind in the world for the second in command. And we have a lot of groups for entrepreneurs, but we had nowhere for their COO to go and learn and connect with each other. So we started the COO Alliance, and now we've got members from 5 countries, and we have 5 events per year.
Let's just go back to that gap when you said in those early years when you were coaching entrepreneurs, 120, I think you said, Where did that come from? Was that something you were putting together as you went along on your journey, or was it something you sort of took the best bits from other people's work and just started dabbling at helping businesses?
No, when I was 20, I got involved with a franchising company called College Pro Painters, which ended up becoming the largest residential house painting company in the world. I was a franchisee for them, so that was my first company. I registered my business and started hiring people, and I was a part of this franchise organization. And when I graduated from university, they had about 400 franchisees every year. Every franchisee would quit in September and go back to university, and they'd go out and recruit and hire a whole new batch of franchisees and train them and then coach them. So I got involved with them on recruiting, hiring, training, and coaching franchisees. In fact, two of my employees back in 1993, one was Kimball Musk, who was Elon's brother, and then the second was Peter Reeve, who was Elon's cousin, who built Solar City. They were both franchisees for me. I recruited them and hired them and trained them as franchisees back in 1993.
Wow.
So that was where I really learned that was where I learned how to run operational businesses, because we only had 4 months to get this business up and running, and we'd do $60 million in house painting in 4 months. So we became operationally world-class at interviewing, recruiting, operations, execution, meeting rhythms, etc.
And a lot of the stuff then I've read in Double Double, and I've mentioned Double Double a couple of times in the lead up to this. Was that stuff you were using back then, or was that stuff that you've evolved to now?
Bits and pieces of it. Yeah, I've said for years that I've never been smart enough to figure this out on my own, that my R&D stands for rip off and duplicate. I've always looked for the systems that really smart people or really smart companies are using, and then I try to put those in place and use those. I've always seen entrepreneurs, including myself at times, like the fly trying to get out the window, where if we work harder, we're going to get out the window, but we end up dead on the windowsill. We keep banging our head on it when there's an easier path. So I always look for the cheat sheets, and these systems that were taught at College Pro Painters became very foundational. But then, in every business along the way, building 1-800-GOT-JUNK, we ranked as the #2 company in Canada to work for. We got to 3,100 employees. So I learned a lot from there. I'm a part of 5 different mastermind groups. I pay to be in 5 different mastermind groups. I've gone to the main TED conference 10 years in a row. I had a coach who was being groomed as the second in command at Starbucks. So I've always worked on myself and growing myself, but always looking for the cheat sheets.
All right, a couple more questions about you, and then maybe we'll dive into some of the ones I've pre-prepared. For everyone who's listening, if you have got any questions for Cameron, please do. I'll keep an eye on the chat box and the question box. Please do share, send them over. This is your session rather than mine. So I've had the pleasure of hearing Cameron speak a couple of times and had some coaching calls with his good self. So what still motivates you, Cameron? Obviously, I can only assume that you've done really well out of those various things you've done along the way, but you're still doing it. So what is it that motivates you to still do it?
Well, I'm too young to play golf 7 days a week. And I really genuinely love helping entrepreneurs make their dreams happen. It's funny, like Simon Sinek, who wrote the book Start With Why. I met Simon 5 years before he wrote that book, really before anyone had ever met Simon. He flew out to Vancouver to meet Brian and I to find out if we were real. He'd read about us in Fortune magazine, and he was on our board for a year and spoke at our conferences. And one night he was at my home for dinner years before he did his TEDx talk. And we were talking about why I do what I do. And it came down that I just love helping entrepreneurs make their dreams happen. I loved doing it when I was a franchisee. I loved the little cheat sheets. I loved doing all these little operational things when I was a kid. I probably had 18 different entrepreneurial ventures by the time I was 18 years old. I could list them all right now. So in every one of those, I always found these little hacks or these little things that would make a business run better. And I love sharing those ideas. And I think I kind of love doing it because in school, I was always told to study more and pay attention and get a tutor. And the reality was I was never going to be smart enough to memorize it all or to learn it all. So I always like to find those cheat sheets. And I think in business, it's the same way. It's how can I help other people so we don't have to spend all day studying?
Okay, so how about can we pick 3 of those top 3 cheats that you learned back then that would still be relevant now?
Sure. One of them is that a no is just one step closer to a yes. When I was quite young, I went selling things door to door. My dad would have these products from his business that he would have extras of, and I would go, knock on doors. And So learning how to handle rejection and learning how to ask for the order and learning how to, every door that I got a no, at some point someone said yes. And I just realized I just had to knock on more doors and I would get closer. But that's a lesson that at 8 years old just sticks with you. I learned about negotiating, that you can, Chris Voss says never split the difference, but I learned one day that I could split the difference. I was 7 years old and I was negotiating with a dry cleaning store to give them coat hangers, and they were going to use those coat hangers again. So recycling coat hangers. And they wanted to pay me 3 cents per coat hanger and I wanted 4 cents per coat hanger. And I said to the guy finally, how about 3.5 cents? And he started laughing and he said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 7. And I just learned that, I just knew that in between 3 and 4 was 3.5, and I wanted 4 and he wanted 3, and I wasn't going to give in. So that's an art again in negotiations. And then another one was never giving no as the option. So I created these little wooden chairs that I would have pin cushions. This is back in the day, in the 70s, when women would sit at home and sew, and they all had pin cushions for all their sewing pins and needles. And I created this little rocking chair and a pin cushion, and I would sell it. And I only had one and it was beige. And the woman's like, oh, I would buy one if it was brown and would match my desk. And I said, I'll be back in an hour. And I went home and I spray painted it brown, and I came back and she said, perfect. So then I started going to the door with brown and white, and it wasn't, do you want to buy one or not? It was like, which one would you like to buy, white or brown? So I took away no as the option, and I just gave them a different option. It's kind of like now where they say, you have 3 options, and you don't go in with yes or no. You go in with, here are the 3 things. Which one would you like?
Yeah. We've had our first question in from our audience. So if there's one thing that you think for a business is most important to get it right over anything else, what would that be?
Focus. It's clear. It absolutely comes down to focus. So at the end of the day, we only have 3 resources. We have people, we have time, and we have money. And it's all about those 3 inputs generating the highest return on investment. So at the end of the day, it's how focused are you? How focused is your team? How focused are you with your client or the demographic or the psychographic profile? How focused is your marketing? How focused is your messaging? Do you wake up in the morning, being busy working on email, or are you focused on your plan and focused on your goals? I talk about plan your work and work your plan, that old basic adage. But most people aren't focused, and they end up finishing a week saying, wow, I didn't get enough done. Well, whose fault is that? It's really not about having the best product or the best service, or it's just, I think a lot of it comes down to focus. Monomaniacs with a mission.
Let's move. So on that point, then let's maybe move on to vision. I imagine a lot of people's visions right now would be changing. They'd be panicking. They might have set out a 3 or 5 or 10-year plan, and then potentially all that they'll feel like some of that's gone out the window, if not all of it's gone out the window. What advice would you say? What would you say to those people right now, given what a fan you are about, and you've written a whole book on vivid vision?
Yeah, you just touched on 2 points. One is the vision, and the second is the plan. So what I like to do is have a vision for what I'm building 3 years out. I call it a vivid vision. And as you mentioned, I've written about it in 3 of my books. One of the books is called Vivid Vision. The second is Double Double. And the third is The Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs. I cover the concept of the vivid vision in all 3 of those. The idea is to lean out 3 years only and describe your business in its finished state 3 years from today. So almost like you're leaning out to December 31st, 2022, and you're going to describe your business as if you're walking around your company, and you describe operations and sales and marketing and finance and IT, and you end up with a 4 or 5 page document describing what your company looks like, acts like, and feels like 3 years in the future. Well, if you hit a situation like, we're in now, where your business is getting impacted, with this COVID-19, or if it was, let's say, 2008 with the global financial crisis, or if it was 2001 with the NASDAQ being down 78%. We hit these, or September 11th with, the buildings being hit in New York. You have these periods of black swans that really shift everything over for you. When you have those situations, your job is to get everyone realigned with a new vision, or to go back to looking at your vivid vision and decide what you can focus on given the constraints that you're in right now. So as an example, my business is really focused around speaking, writing books, coaching entrepreneurial groups, and running my COO Alliance. Well, the only real thing that's been impacted right now is speaking, but I can do more podcast interviews. I can do virtual speaking events where people pay me to be on their webinars. I don't have to travel as much, which has now freed up more of my time. If I focus on the right entrepreneurs, there's lots of entrepreneurs that are doing really well right now. So they're happy to pay for coaching. If I focus on, the wrong entrepreneurial groups like restaurants, they're tight on cash. So it's all about being very focused on the groups that have money and being focused on where my customers are. And then aligning my team with how that vision might have to shift a little bit. I would say that probably only 10 or 15% of businesses have had to have a complete quantum shift, because of the COVID-19, where they're completely shut down or locked out. For the most part, it's just kind of moving everybody. And if you just stay aligned with that 3-year vision, work on different paragraphs of making it come true, by the time we're reopened for business, you can go back and work on the other parts of your business again. This is a great time right now to work on our skill development, to work on growing the skills of our employees, to work on renovating our locations. If we're closed down, it doesn't mean you can't have painters and remodelers and decorating happening. If I owned a restaurant right now, I would be working on all of the renovating and remodeling that I never had time to do before, so that when I'm allowed to have people come back in, my restaurant looks perfectly again. It's going to be astounding to go back into some restaurants that have done nothing.
Absolutely. Just going back to the vision, I still haven't done my homework from the coaching we had last year, and I am on version 7 of it, and I've got a meeting tomorrow. This has kicked me up the arse to sit down and try and get the language right. I had to play with it again last week, and I keep getting the tenses wrong. I keep forgetting to write it as if it's already happened. So,
well, and what else is, I think, for entrepreneurs is your job with the vivid vision is only to get it to 80%. There's some amazing copywriters. I have a woman, Jennifer Hude. She and her team have done over 200 vivid visions for different companies, where they take the rough draft of the entrepreneur and they'll polish it and put it in the future state and write it in a way. And they'll also ask you lots of questions to really kind of build it out. So there might be opportunities for people when they get it to 80% to pass it to somebody else. Instead of you trying to get it to perfect, which takes a year, if you get it to pretty good and pass it to somebody and they get it to very good and they pass it to a designer, you can get it to excellent. That can all happen within the course of 2 weeks. The problem for most entrepreneurs is we try to do things ourselves and we hold on to it, and that slows down everything. Momentum creates momentum. Perfection slows everything down.
We'll take another question from the audience. So when recruiting, how do you make sure that the candidate has the right mindset to actually take responsibility, use their initiative, prioritize, etc.? I found people sometimes say that they have these qualities, and once they start, you realize that's not the reality.
Right. So the reality is that most interviewers do a shitty job of interviewing, and they don't do any reference checks, or they don't do what I call TORC, which is the threat of reference checks. So one of my clients one day said, well, it takes about 90 days after you've hired someone to know if you hired the right person. And I said, that's because you've done a shitty job interviewing them. But if you interview them properly, if you truly probe, if you spend hours asking the tough questions, if you grill them like crazy, if you phone 5 of their personal friends and 5 business associates, if you scroll through their Facebook pages and their LinkedIn profiles and you get to learn more about them, you can actually understand them a lot more. But most people don't do a good enough job interviewing. So in my book, Double Double, I talk about some really, really good tools to do good interviews. I also recommend the book Who by Jeff Smart. In fact, I actually have Jeff Smart coming to speak at our June COO Alliance event on recruiting and interviewing. His father wrote the book Top Grading, which is used by all the top companies on the planet. So when you use the right tools to interview people, you know everything about them before they show up. But it's kind of like dating. Like you would never go and have coffee with somebody and say, well, I'll get married. Of course you wouldn't. Like you spend more time dating them and you sleep with them and you talk to their friends, you get to know their circles, you meet their families, you think through it a little bit. But for some reason in interviewing, we try to do it really quickly. We do an even worse job when we hire a supplier or when we hire freelancers. Oh, freelancers are terrible. No, you just hired the first one that was introduced to you. You did a terrible job interviewing the freelancer.
Yeah, I think we're lazy, aren't we? We might do 2 or 3 interviews, think we spent 3 hours with someone and think that's enough. And yeah, certainly would recommend Double Double for those who are looking at their hiring journey.
Yeah.
Take one of the ones I prepared, another one. So Kipling wrote, to keep your head when all around you are losing theirs. What is your advice to those that may be losing their heads at this moment in time?
Well, misery loves company, right? You think about all the grandmotherisms that are so true. misery loves company. Right now, we're being bombarded on social media with all the problems. So just shut down social media and realize maybe it's not such a bad place after all. I'll give you an example. In British Columbia, where I live, Vancouver, there's 5 million people in the province, but there's only been 4,000 cases and only 220 people have died, which means 5 million people are still alive. Maybe it's not so bad after all. But when you get on social media and it's like, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, watch a movie called The Great Hack, or watch Carol's talk on Cambridge Analytica, the TED Talk, about how social media can be manipulated against you. It's really interesting. I even wrote about it in my book, Free PR, of how to leverage social media to push your story out. The reality is you're being fed the news, and the more you look at that news, the more that it's feeding you even more of that on the algorithm. So, if you, as let's say, Craig, you read, another financial article, another financial article, another financial article, all of a sudden your news feed is going to be filled with financial articles. Mine's not. If I'm reading about, rock climbing and skiing and golfing and skiing and rock climbing, my news feed's all of a sudden going to be filled with those. But if somebody's into music and food, we're being fed without even realizing it. So stop spending time with the negative people. Start spending time in mastermind groups or communities of people that believe in abundance, people that are driving the world forward, people that care. And then slow your life down a little bit and take care of yourself. Get exercise, stop working nights, stop working weekends. You're never going to catch up in the first place. And if you can detach a little bit and slow things down to, be mindful and do yoga and get some exercise and spend time on your hobbies, you'll realize life is pretty darn good.
Yeah, I echo all of that. Another question from our attendees. So what's the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I'll give you the worst, the worst business decision I'll give you two of the worst business decisions. The first one is the most expensive business decision I ever made, where I probably let ego and not asking enough questions and not trusting my network enough. So this was the summer of 2008. We were at Burning Man. It was very late at night, and we were talking with some entrepreneur friends. I brought Tim Ferriss, who wrote The 4-Hour Workweek, was one of my friends, to Burning Man for his first burn. So he was in my camp with me, and he brought a friend of his in, and his friend was pitching us on this new business idea. And he was explaining an app, but none of us understood what an app was or what an app store would be, because the app, you would go on an app and you would push a button and a taxi or a limo would show up. And we said, well, this is the stupidest thing we've ever heard of. And this was the founder of Uber pitching us on Uber 6 months before he hired Travis Selnick to be CEO. So it was Garrett Camp, who was the original founder of Uber from Calgary, Canada, pitching us on Uber. My normal investment back then would have been around 25,000. Of the 5 of us who were listening, 4 of us said it was the dumbest thing we'd ever heard. Tim Ferriss invested his 25,000. That's worth about $108 million today. So a very, very expensive lesson where I let ego get in the way. I was still very confident, having come off of 1-800-GOT-JUNK and building this $100 million business, that I thought that I knew my shit and didn't realize that somebody might be onto something. Just because I didn't understand it didn't make it a dumb idea. The worst business decision I think we ever made was at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, where we never listened to our CFO. We had a very quiet, very analytical, very amiable Indonesian CFO or VP of finance. And Brian and I were very dominant, very expressive, very kind of driven. We were tight, high quick starts. I was a 98D on the disc profile. And Hendra, our very quiet finance person, would say, be careful. And I think we're spending too quickly. And are you sure this is a good decision right now? And can we wait? And we're like, no, we got it. And what happened was that we were very profitable. We were making money every single year. We had about $5 million of cash in the bank. And we spent about $1 million on an office renovation. We spent about $600,000 on an office move, $800,000 in taxes, $600,000 in bonuses to employees. We drained a lot of our cash, and we needed money to meet payroll, and we didn't have it. So we went to the bank for a credit line, and the bank said, well, we can't loan to you. And we said, what are you talking about? We've been profitable for 6 years. We're hitting all of our goals. We're number 2 in Canada to work for last year. And they said, yeah, but you don't have any cash. We're like, yeah, but we dispense it all. And they said, yeah, if you'd come to us 3 months ago with 5 million in the bank, we would have lent you 5 million, but now we can't loan to you. And we're like, what are you talking about? So we didn't understand finance. We didn't understand how to leverage our balance sheet. We didn't understand how to manage our business cash flow wise. And we wouldn't listen to somebody who was in an important role. So the lesson was, if you have people in a role or even in a meeting, and I talk about this in my book, Meetings Suck, if you invite people to a meeting, your job is to listen to them. Your job is to get them to speak. Your job is to get them to be heard. Otherwise, invite other people, so the worst business decision was probably not listening to our VP of finance. We almost lost the company. Brian had to borrow $420,000 from his mom to meet payroll.
Wow. You talk a lot in all of your books and on the talks I've seen you do about culture. Can you maybe share with the people worried about their staff right now, motivating their staff for their teams? Can you maybe share some top tips on how to build a great culture?
Yeah, one of my mentors, Greg Clark, who was the founder of College Pro Painters, said a business has to be a little bit more than a business and a little bit less than a religion. It has to be in that zone of a cult. And that's where culture comes from. So culture is not about the free lunch and the massages and the bicycles on campus. That's not culture. Culture starts with an alignment with vision. So everyone can see where you're going and everyone is excited to go where you're going. I talk about the story of the 3 people that are out sitting on a sidewalk and they're making bricks. And they asked the first guy, what are you doing? He said, I'm making bricks. They said to the second guy, what are you doing? He said, we're building a wall. And I get to make the bricks to build the wall. And they asked the third guy, what are you doing? And he was aligned with the vision. He said, we're building a cathedral to worship God, and we get to make the bricks to build the left wall of the cathedral. So the culture for that one person who is very aligned with vision was powerful. The second is alignment with core values. And it's really making sure that your people already live the core values of the organization before they get there, that you fire people who break the core values, that you cheer people on and reinforce the core values on a day-to-day basis with people so they feel like that they're really important and lived. The third is having a mission that's bigger than the organization. So that's that big, hairy, audacious goal, the BHAG, and really having people aligned with, something like at Apple, it's that they create insanely great products to challenge the status quo and change the human race. Or with my business, we are replacing mission statements with vivid visions worldwide. So it's having some kind of a core purpose that's a long-term drive that you're driving towards. And then lastly is that core purpose of why you exist. And culture starts with people understanding why we exist. Everything I do helps entrepreneurs make their dreams happen. Whether it's the books that I write, the videos that I put out, the social media messages that we share, the COO Alliance, my speaking, it's all about helping entrepreneurs. I don't work with government. I don't work with nonprofits. I don't work with corporations. I work with entrepreneurial organizations to help them make their dreams come true. That's where culture starts with. And then when you give people the right tools to do their job and you align them and you get out of their way, then it's your job just to support them. So it's all about coaching them and cheering them on and coaching them and cheering them on.
So how, I've read different things from different people about how often you should share that, how involved you should get your team with that. Any top tips on how often you should share your Vivid Vision team, or if you're just starting your journey, whether you should involve your team in your Vivid Vision journey?
Yeah, so it's the entrepreneur's job is to craft the vision and share the vision. Because if the entrepreneur tries to get too many people writing the vision, it's not inspiring. It would be like, let's say I wanted to build my dream home. Should I go and get all of my neighbors' ideas? Should I go and talk to all the workers and the electricians and the plumbers and get their ideas? Or should I craft the vivid vision of what my home looks like and then get a contractor to get the plans to make my dreams come true and maybe tell me a couple things I'm crazy about and I have to tweak, but it's really my vision of what I'm building. And then when the contractor has the plans to make my vision come true. So what I like doing is get the leadership team to come up with the plans to make the vision come true. The entrepreneur signs off on the plans and the team signs off on the vision.
And how often would you encourage people to share that with their team?
So you're sharing your vivid vision every 3 months. Every 3 months, you want your employees to reread it. You want to share it with your customers, with your suppliers. You want to share it with potential employees. And you're constantly pushing that out so that people are excited about what you're building and where you're going. I share it with every speaking event that I do. It's on my website. There's links to it on our marketing material. You're constantly sharing where you're going, but you're not going to share the plan on how you're going to make it come true.
Yeah.
So the blueprints are kept separate.
We've had another question from our attendees. Who has influenced you the most in your life or your business life, and why?
I would probably go back again and say Greg Clark with College Pro Painters. I think he was extraordinarily exceptional in an era without technology to communicate. He would share his messages and his thoughts, which today would be, you know, a Facebook Lives or little Facebook memos. He would produce these G thoughts, and I've got a book of them, of all of his memos and ideas. He was really good at understanding how to build a cult. He was really good at understanding how to put systems and processes in place to allow for scale. He was fantastic at keeping great employees. And if the employee, you know, wanted to grow within the company, if he didn't have any space, he would just let the employee go to a different region. Like I moved to Washington, and I opened up Washington and Oregon and Idaho in the United States. I moved from Toronto, Canada. I wanted to move up in the company, but there was nowhere for me in Ontario to move up, but there was if I moved. So he was really good at just allowing the company to expand, which would allow people to move. It was just, I could go with lesson after lesson after lesson from College Pro Painters.
We've got another one come in. What, in 5 years' time, how do you think we will look back at this time? And if we don't like the answer, what should we do now to influence how we will feel about what we did?
Well, I think, you know, it goes back to the glass being half full or half empty. You know, you can go back and look over history for the last, you know, I'm 54 years old. I've been through the 1987 stock market crash, the 2001 stock market crash, 2008 global financial crisis. So financially, I did really, really well in 2001 and in 2009. I did really well because when the markets were way down, I started investing a lot of cash into it. And I knew that it would come back again. Sure, and I had friends, I could show you the Facebook post in 2009 where I said I was going to be investing, and they said they thought I was crazy and they told me not to do it. And I went deep on 8 stocks, and a year later I was up 109%. You know, I went back in the early March, I was saying I'm buying more Bitcoin, and people thought I was crazy. But I was talking about getting involved in Bitcoin in 2014. Again, on Facebook, if you search Bitcoin, my name, 2014, you'll see the posts saying I was accepting payment for speaking and coaching in Bitcoin. Bitcoin was only worth $600. You know, back in March, I said I was buying more at 5,700. People told me I was nuts. Today I was at 9,800. So I think you have to choose your future. So even if it's COVID-19 and a crisis and well, you know, what are you doing for fun right now? If you're locked in your house, you know, here's something I'm doing for fun. I'm learning how to play guitar right now. You know, I'm going for walks every day. I'm spending more time with my kids. I've got the game Clue set up on our dining room table for my kids and I to play. I'm spending more time cooking at home. Like, you have to decide to kind of choose the best out of your. No one's going to hand you a great life. You know, no one's going to hand, like, there's lots of people in the last 9 years where the stock market has gone up that didn't make any money. Like we've had the best, lowest unemployment for years in the United States and probably globally. And there's lots of people that still hated their shitty jobs. Well, quit your shitty job and go work somewhere else. So I think how we're going to look back on it is how we decide to look back on it. It's how we decide to capitalize on it, whether it be financially or health-wise or fitness-wise. Like, my girlfriend does workouts every single day online, virtual, where she's got trainers and yoga people and she's doing HIIT workouts. She's in the best shape of her life right now because she's working out 6 days a week. There's other people that are sitting at home filled with misery, reading social media about how bad things is. She's living in the same world, choosing to find good. So yeah, I think it's a choice.
Perspective. We have one of our large national papers yesterday did a billionaire list, female billionaires, and the headline was not how well these people have done. The headline was 54 billion wiped off these people's values in the last 6 weeks. It's like,
right.
It hasn't gone anywhere. It's just down at the moment if it's markets or whatever.
You see, if it bleeds, it leads. The newspapers, I wrote about this in my book, Free PR, that the newspapers and magazines and TV stations, they only want to talk about the stuff that is negative because that sells. But the reality is there's all kinds of people doing really well. So, where every time there's a seller, there's a buyer. I think it all comes down to, for anyone who's listening or watching today, why don't you make a list of 3 things you can do right now that are going to make today a great day, and then go do those 3 things. I use a book called the 5-Minute Journal, where I write down the 3 things I'm grateful for, the 3 things that would make today great, my daily affirmations. And then at the end of the day, I wrote down what I got done. I have an accountability partner. At the beginning of my day or the end of the prior day, I make a list of the top 3 things I'm going to get done with an accountability partner. They get an email first thing in the morning saying, oh, Cameron said his top 3, and that gets them to set their top 3. But it's all about focus. Where your focus goes, energy flows.
Yeah, I do something similar with an app called Win Streak, where at the end of every day I look for the 3 positives that I got done.
Yeah, that's a Dan Sullivan tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember you writing a whole book on PR, and I did speak to you about this a bit last year, and talking to the local press. Can you share some tips from the book that maybe people can help to get themselves some good PR? Because I find the little bit of work we've tried to do, they're very negative. They're looking for cash because they're struggling, or the written press certainly is. Any top tips for people to sort of hack?
So first one is to understand the media outlet that you want to get covered in, and the journalist and writer, and who or viewers, like who their target audience is, what their target audience looks like and acts like, so you can position your story or spin your story for that audience. So as an example, if I was pitching the COO Alliance, the only network of its kind in the world for the second in command, and I was positioning the Wall Street Journal or Entrepreneur Magazine or the Vancouver Sun or a blogger, I'm going to understand the audience a little bit more. If I was contacting the Vancouver Sun, I would call them about 4 local companies whose second in commands are members of the COO Alliance that happens to be a big US-based organization. And I would get the story to talk about why these 4 companies are investing in their COOs, investing in their growth, and I would make the story about them. And then I would take that story and I would put it on my social media feeds. I would push it out to my list. I'd email it to my list. I'd link it to my website, and I'd drive ad traffic towards it. If I was going after the Wall Street Journal, I would probably talk about how, I've got the second in command for the Dow Jones Newswire is coming in. I've got the second in command for Visa is on our podcast. And I interviewed the second in command for Shopify, which is, probably a couple $100 billion valuation right now, Harley Finkelstein on our podcast. So it depends on the audience that you're going after, how you're going to position your story for that audience.
Okay. Another question's come in. What would you say are the top three strategies to not only survive but thrive in the current climate?
To not only survive but thrive. Again, one comes down to focus. So really deciding what your focus is going to be, really setting core goals to focus on. Like I'm working on a course right now. I have more time because I'm not traveling. So I'm working on my course and getting into studio and getting my course filmed, so that when we actually transition and I'm back on live stages, I have something else to sell from stage. Instead of waiting to be on a stage going, shit, I wish I had a course, I'm going to get my course done. So I'm leaning out into the future, working back on that plan and executing on what I can today. Another one is to really, really look at firing some of your bottom customers, getting rid of the negative, grumpy, pain in the ass customers that suck up your time and your energy, and really only working with the customers that give you good energy. I talked to a CEO coach about 2 weeks ago, and he said all of his CEOs that he coaches are really negative and grumpy and worried. I'm like, you picked them. Like, I don't know why you're targeting turnarounds. All of his clients are in a turnaround space. I don't work with turnarounds. I only work with companies that are already accelerating in their growth. So all of my clients tend to be happy and focused and feelings of abundance, but that's who I choose. So it's really thinking a little bit about that. And I think the last one would be focusing on growing your team, growing the capacity, growing the skills. The more you grow your people, the more they're going to grow the company.
Okay. What else have we got here? What do you want your legacy to be then, Cameron?
I don't think it has anything to do with work. I think my legacy is just, I have 2 boys that are 17 and 19, and my responsibility and my opportunity is to just connect with them and spend time with them and grow them into happy, healthy, independent adults, just to continue on, I guess, what, my parents and my grandparents and their, before them started is, That's really that's my legacy is my kids. No one's going to give a shit about the companies that I built or nor like it doesn't, at the end of the day, what we do for work is just how we earn money, right? It's how we pay the bills. I think that it's fun. I love doing what I do. I love the companies that I've built, but I think I never want to lose sight of the fact that that's just what I do to make money.
I love your TED talk on parenting. I keep meaning to go back and watch it after watching it last year. What would you say to people who are being the best parents they can be at this time?
One is just being very empathetic and listening to my kids. I was sitting just listening to my son last night and just, you know, he was talking about drinking and wondering if he should drink and saying he doesn't really want to drink, but I'm guessing he's under some peer pressure and just, you know, so I'm thinking that today he and I are going to go for a walk together. I can't run anymore because I got my hip replaced 2 months ago, but we'll either go for a walk or we'll go for a bike ride and just sit and chat with him, you know, just sit and actually connect and listen. So some of it's just being very present with them. You know, what are they thinking and worrying? My kids are at an age, 17 and 19, where I'm sure they're worried internally about disease and what's happening to the world, but I don't think they're thinking about the economics of it all, nor should they really worry about it, because the new for them, or the new normal for them, you know, economically, they'll be fine, right? You know, if we hit inflation or deflation or hyperinflation, whatever, they'll just be on that wave, whatever that wave is. It's interesting watching this generation, Gen Z. Generation Z is 24 and down to 4 right now. They don't care about owning things. They don't want to own the big homes. They don't want to own cars. They don't want to have stuff. They want experiences. They want time. They want, they're going back to just truly enjoying life, and they're way more global. My kids are much more global than kind of living in a city forever. It's interesting to see what they're thinking about education right now as well, where, you know, their education is being shifted completely, that now it's all about learning online. And I wondered whether this is finally going to be the fall of the post-secondary institutions in North America, that, or at least in the United States, that have gotten too expensive. You know, my son's tuition in Victoria, Canada is only $5,000 a year. And I think tuition in the US is like $25,000 to $40,000 a year. You know, there's no ROI on the US post-secondary education anymore.
Another question from our audience. You've talked about positivity and adaptation. What adapt hacks can you share with us to help us grow?
What adapt hacks? First is thinking about your future, leaning out into the future and deciding where you're going, so that you know where you're going, you can start figuring out how to get there. And I think when you're very clear on where you're going, you can kind of model other people that have gone in that direction already. I think if you don't think about where you're going, then you're just learning stuff at random. I think any books that you read, any podcasts that you listen to, any content that you absorb or try to learn from should all be moving in a direction of something, right? You're trying to do something or move in a certain direction. That's why you're learning it. That's why you're reading it. That's why you're devouring that content.
On that subject then, what's your favorite book this year, or maybe top 3 books for our audience, and maybe top 2 or 3 podcasts outside of your own, of course?
Yeah. Podcasts, I'm all over the map. I'm loving listening to Gary Vee again. I've known Gary for 10 years. Tim Ferriss's stuff, I'm being very picky with listening to some of Tim Ferriss's. Some of Lewis Howes, who again I've known for 10 years. Some of Lewis's guests I think are pretty interesting. Jordan Harbinger, again, a friend of mine. I really like a lot of Jordan Harbinger's guests. In terms of books, there's 2 that I can highly recommend that were really, really influential, that I'm getting a lot of my clients on. The first one is called The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. And it's all around making decisions in kind of wartime environments, which we're definitely in right now. It's a very short, punchy business book that, you know, each chapter is only 2 or 3 pages. So you get some really solid takeaways and ideas. And I think it's really powerful for the timing that we're in. The second one is called Insanely Simple. And it's all about the methodologies and mindset that Steve Jobs had inside of Apple on simplifying everything and keeping everything simple and not letting anything ever get overcomplicated when it comes down to like their wording or meeting rhythms, the way they run the business. It was really powerful.
So last shout out to our audience for any more final questions. I'll ask one that just popped in my head as you were talking then. So what 3 questions would you ask Steve Jobs?
First question I would ask Steve Jobs is, how did he get through being fired from Apple? What was it that he did to protect his confidence and protect his ego? How did he get through that time? The second is, what were his lessons from the failure of building Next computers, which is prior to when he came back to Apple and Pixar? The third would be, did he have any regrets or any moments of personal growth when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer? Did that change anything for him?
We've got a question from the audience, from Rich. On teaching kids to be entrepreneurs, in what ways would you encourage children to be entrepreneurial while also encouraging them to continue doing well at their conventional education in school/college?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first off is, and I'm glad that Rich asked that question the way he asked it, because I don't think that all kids should be entrepreneurs. I think that about 3% of the population have the DNA to be entrepreneurs, but I think more kids can be entrepreneurial. And what I mean by that is, a true entrepreneur is someone who's going to build a business that has other people doing things, which should free up the time and cash for the person who's starting it. Being entrepreneurial could be being a freelancer and doing the job that you love for 7 different companies. That's not an entrepreneur, that's being entrepreneurial. And I think more kids should be focused on that. It's going to allow them to travel, to adapt, to not be stuck to one job, to spread out their risk. It allows them to have more of their free time. So I think focusing that is focused for kids to be entrepreneurial. The part about doing well in their education, I think well is really should be up to the kid to decide what well is. No one who got straight A's, no one who got a 4.0 has ever been able to show their university transcript to anybody. The reality is, no one actually gives a shit what your grades were in university or college. No one knows that my grades were 62%. I got a solid D plus or a C minus grade point average. But no one's ever going to look at my transcript. No one's actually going to care. What they do know is that I was president of a fraternity. I was president of the university ski team. I skied in 2 American Canadian championships while I was at university. I ran a bar. I was involved in clubs, and I was engaged in university life. That's more important to me than the grades that I got. And I think that for the kids these days, they have to go and enjoy the whole university experience if they're going to be there. But I also think that for the sake of learning, there could often be a much cheaper way. See, when I went to university, and anybody 40 or older, when we went to university, we had to memorize everything because there was no other place to find that information. There was no Google. I went away to university with a typewriter. So we had to memorize it, because to go to the library to find the damn book took too long. Whereas now kids don't have to memorize it. They have to know how to problem solve and collaborate and work together as a team. So I think kids are learning more about the business skills they're going to need and the life skills from playing video games and collaborating online and chatting online than they are about sitting in a classroom. I think the university post-secondary education system is very, very broken in terms of the ROI. So I think what kids should try to get out of their university is go take courses you like if you're going to be there, and get involved in university life while you're there, or take a look at the return on investment of your time and your money. You may get a better return on that time and money off of going to get jobs and apprenticing and go party and have fun and have sex and live with everybody your own age while you're, gaining some experience and not going to debt.
I hope my kids aren't listening to this or watching this and they're hearing that bit about they can play more video games, because that's something I try to control. But so a couple more questions come in. What advice would you give to your 19-year-old personal self and business self?
19-year-old business self, the personal self, I would say, just ask her out. She'll say yes. Just flirt more, hit on her. It's amazing how many chances I had to be with really cute girls and date them and get to know them that I was too scared. And realizing that everybody's nervous, everybody's insecure. My 19-year-old business self, lose the ego. Um, Realize that there's some amazingly smart people that aren't necessarily dressed up as smart people. You know, that true, you can't judge a book by its cover. Yeah, those would probably be the two.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. Let's bring it together, finish off with your books. Then obviously you've done the 5 books. Which order would you suggest people who maybe hadn't heard of you before this or haven't picked up one of your books yet, which order would you suggest they read them in?
Yeah, well, for definitely check out my podcast as well. We have the Second in Command podcast where we interview COOs for really great companies, and they give amazing operational insights that you'll never get from the entrepreneur. I would say that the 2 books probably for your audience would be Double Double, and then also The Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs. I think both of those are really, really solid for this audience for sure. And then every company should have every employee read the book Meeting Suck. So if you've got 20 employees, buy 20 copies of Meeting Suck, give a copy of it to every employee. It teaches the employees not only how to run meetings, but also how to attend them and show up and participate at them. And it's for $15 per person. It'll be a game changer in your company to buy a copy for every single employee and have them read it.
Fantastic. Any final inspirational words, any final top tips for people who might be still there thinking, right, what do I do next?
I think the big one is just to remember that this is just what we're doing to make money, that go and have some fun at this, right? That at the end of the day, none of us are getting out of this alive. If we don't die with COVID-19, we're going to die at some point in the next 100 years. This is just what we're doing to make a buck. So have some fun along the way, you know, chase down some hobbies, learn some, laugh some, live some, hold hands while you cross the street.
Well, Cameron, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all of those of you dialed in. If anyone wants a recording of this afterwards, drop me a direct message or email me, and I'll happily share it once I've worked out how to do that. I'm sure I can. But thank you all. Thank you, Michelle, for those kind words, and we'll see you all again.
Thanks, Craig. Bye, Michelle. Bye, Sarah. Bye, Rich. Bye, everybody.
So, do they all leave now? Or?